into reading as a kid, there were definitely 3 author groups that always had my attention. You've already heard me talk about 2 of them in the past, Dr. Seuss and Stan and Jan Berenstain. But also among them were the writings of Robert Quackenbush. Quackenbush sadly passed away earlier this year, but left behind a legacy of outstanding books and series meant to get young kids into mystery and critical thinking. The winner of the 1982 Edgar Allan Poe Award, he created memorable characters like Detective Mole, Pete Packrat, and Sherlock Chick. But for me, his greatest series was that of Miss Mallard. Clearly inspired by the likes of Miss Marple and Agatha Christie, the books were about the world's greatest duck-tective and her adventures solving mysteries around the world. The Miss Mallard mysteries were among the first books that I would search the library shelves for regularly, looking for new titles. With them having been so connected to my childhood, I naturally took notice upon discovering they were adapted into an animated series around the turn of the century. Distributed by Cookie Jar Entertainment, the company that first bought up Deke Animation, the series was originally made for the Canadian network Teletoon before eventually making its way to syndication on American networks. Do they hold up to the books that helped me win that Super Reader contest back in 1st grade? Let's find out for ourselves as we look at the Miss Mallard Mystery animated series. So the first episodes of the series definitely are direct adaptations of the books, though definitely not in the same order. The first episode was Lost in the Amazon, which actually was one of the last books in the series that Quackenbush wrote.
It's the dancer from the reception. The same person who was in Dr. Idestein's laboratory. Dr. Idestein, I presume.
My dear friend Marjorie Mallard.
I think you will find the wing prints on this vial will match none other than Miguel de Docerio. That is how Jorge Baldpate and Linos Ruddyduck found out about Jungle New. They were the ones who made the threats and ransacked your laboratory. I am sure a handwriting analysis of this note would reveal which one of them wrote it.
Subsequent episodes were directly based off of titles I remember reading. Titles such as Stairway to Doom, Express Train to Trouble, Gondola to Danger, and Rickshaw to Horror. Did I mention these books were made for kids? The recurring theme of the episodes is that our title character is always jet-setting around the world with her nephew Willard, himself a member of the Swiss police force, yet somehow always has the time to make these trips. Until some type of mystery just runs right into them. I'd say Miss Mallard is basically Jessica Fletcher, but there's actually not a lot of murder involved here. So instead, we need to compare it to something else.
You are the duck who tried to steal my knitting bag. You were trying to get the microfilm back. Christopher would obtain secret plans and hide them in cakes so they could easily be delivered to his spy ring. Christopher decorates his cakes with script writing.
I could never get him to print the messages. Now I see why. He wanted to keep the cake separated, his from mine.
Yeah, I can't really deny this. The show pretty much has the basic Scooby-Doo formula. It usually centers around some mysterious person, or duck, wreaking havoc on everyone else, and then we're seeing Miss Mallard gathering clues and encountering a growing number of suspects until she can deduce who the ultimate culprit really was.
You shouldn't be surprised, Vera. After all, you knitted the Totem Avenger's mittens. It's a well-knitted mitten. Identical to this scarf you made.
So I give Jed a pair of mittens for Christmas. I had no idea he was the Totem Avenger.
And Arnold, did you carve and paint a pair of totem pole wings for Jed's Christmas present, too? You, Vera, Jed, and And some other townsfolk weren't very happy when a group led by Sheriff Ruddy Duck got ducked and declared a nature preserve.
I didn't know that Abigail was on to me. When I got the news of her death, I knew I had to have this place. And if it weren't for that meddling detective, it would have been mine.
It's a pretty simple format, and one that can be easily translated to the screen for anyone who had read the books. However, these episodes did have to deal with one issue that is actually the reverse of what many other adaptations have to deal with. See, most books are written so large that when someone decides to adapt them, particularly into movies, they have to edit down the story in order to fit into a 2 to 3 hour time block. Even The Lord of the Rings needed to be truncated like this, despite being a movie trilogy that encased nearly 10 hours of content. The Miss Mallard books were a different situation. Because they were written for a very young audience, the books themselves were only about 60 to 80 pages, and about half of those pages were for Quackenbush's illustrations. So none of the stories themselves were especially long. Definitely not long enough to fill out a more than 20-minute cartoon by themselves. Even if they had been made into 2 episodes per show, that would have only been enough material for about 8 shows. So in this case, they actually had to drag out each episode in order to fit a half-hour time slot. And one of the ways they did that was by making Willard a much more prominent character. He was only in a couple of the books, but here he gets thrown into every single one of the episodes, including the ones based on books he wasn't in. It might not be too much of a problem to give Miss Mallard her own full-time Watson, but let's just say Willard is treated in the cartoons even worse than Watson himself was in the later Holmes adaptations. In the few books Willard was in, he might not have been as much of a detective genius as his aunt, but he was still no dummy duck. In the cartoons, he's the comic relief, pure and simple.
Please take us to the ferry terminal.
Auntie? The ferry terminal? But I'm hungry. I was hoping to get a spot to eat at the hotel.
He's pretty much Inspector Clouseau, right down to having a hard-ass supervisor who always suffers from his incompetence.
Chief Inspector Bufflehead,
I know what you were doing, Widgeon. Gossiping about top-secret information.
Well, yes.
You all know I can appreciate slapstick comedy as much as the next guy, but was it really necessary to throw into a mystery series? I get that you want your series to not be so damn serious given who it's aimed at, but I think you could find a way to make it lighthearted and fun without adding in someone who's always griping about finding mysteries and falling on his own beak. Willard is almost like Eric the Cavalier in that regard. Well, except how his aunt treats him, is it always seems like his bumbling uncovers a clue and she gives him credit for it.
If you could be so kind as to drop me off.
Inspector Widgeon is the finest daredevil detective I've ever seen.
That's my nephew.
Geez, lady, you gonna give him milk and cookies as a reward? It looks like the first 16 episodes were based off of the books, and then they pretty much needed to create 10 more original stories to fill out the full season. I suppose the stories they created for the rest of the series could have been ones Quackenbush would have made into books. Yes, even the one where they went into outer space. Hey, at least it was just one episode and not an entire sequel series. But as for how this Miss Mallard mystery cartoon pans out, I do appreciate that these creators look to bring to life a series I wasn't even aware people still knew about at the turn of the century. And they do get it right with the title character's personality for the most part. It just kinda irks me that they had to dumb down another major character in order to stretch out the stories and keep interested the show's main audience. Still, it's harmless and close enough to the source material that I really can't gripe that much. It didn't really draw my interest upon watching, but it's definitely worth showing to kids if you have them. And of course I recommend showing your kids the books if at all possible. I'm not exactly sure how in print they still are at this day. But I get the feeling when I said we'd be reviewing one of the greatest mystery book series ever, some of you may have had something else in mind. Oh, don't worry, my rowdy friends. We'll be getting to that next time.